Hey everyone, it's Christos here, aka the Frag, and say hello to my little friend. This is Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd is trying to find Battersea Power Station in London so he can fly over and hopefully catch up with the band Pink Floyd. So let's put him down now so he can rest. And so here I am today, dearly beloved. We are gathered here today to review a Fender jazz bass. Before we get started though, if you like what I'm saying, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I'm always putting out new videos on me playing along to my favorite music, reviewing products, anything that I can do to hopefully inspire people, pick up a musical instrument or pick up that old musical instrument in the attic that's been collecting dust and hopefully not termites, okay? We don't want termites coming near our guitars because they're made out of wood and termites like wood, but termites are evil. If you want to leave comments, please feel free to do so. If you want to disagree with me, yeah, that's your right. If you want to disagree with someone else in the postings, fantastic. But please, let's keep it, respectful and dignified. So here I have before me a Fender Vintera 70s jazz bass. So what I'll do is I'll start with some of the specifications of this bass guitar, then go through some of the modifications that I've done. In fact, I'll be pretty much jumping in between that, and also play some sound samples. Now, a disclaimer here, I was supposed to do an original review on a stock Fender Vintera 70s jazz bass, which is this. However, I got a bit lazy and I ordered parts and I've already done my upgrades. So there are a lot of good videos out there with better sound quality that road test the stock Fender Vintera 70s jazz bass, but there aren't any that with the specifications that I've done. Well, probably not many. So I think you're probably more keen to hear this. So let's go through some of the specifications. You have an alder body, the species of wood, tried and tested. It's something that Fender's been using for quite some time. It's the classic original jazz bass design. You can't go wrong with it. You cannot go wrong with it. You've got two single coil pickups. You've got on the website it actually says it's an American bent steel bridge, so I can only assume it's from the American models. And that particular vintage style bent steel bridge has bridge saddles that can be lowered, be heightened, and also move back and forth at intonation. Your control panel consists of a volume for the neck pickup, or the middle pickup if you want to call it that, a volume for the bridge pickup, and a master tone. You've got a 3-ply pickguard. And the one thing that I really like about this one is, and I don't know if it's this bass guitar or the Vintera series in the 70s, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a black, white, black. But as you start from the bottom, the black layer, the bottom black layer is the thickest. Then it moves up to a slightly thinner white layer of plastic, and then the top black layer is the thinnest. And I think that looks really nice. And then you've got your plain Fender neck heel plate with the 4 screws. There's no F, the Fender logo. There's no the wording Fender. There's nothing there. And there's also a little sticker that says, "Do not throw these bass guitars in the bin. Do not do that." Okay? These are not designed to be thrown away. So then you've got obviously your strap holders, which I've changed, but I'll go through the modifications that I've done. Then let's move on to the neck. The body here is gloss polyester, so it's like a varnishy finish, and this particular color is what they call Inca Silver. Now you can get these in 2 colors. You could get them at 3 at one point, but Fender's discontinued the natural finish, so it only comes in a Inca Silver or a traditional 3-color sunburst, the traditional tried and tested color. So now let's move on to the neck. You've got a 34-inch scale, long scale, standard scale. Because this is a jazz bass, it's 1.5 inches width, so it's 38.1 millimeters. You've got proper binding around here, which is really nice and classy. It's not painted, it's actually binding that's been wrapped around the neck. So part of the neck has been engraved or chipped away to make way for the binding. And the binding lines up with the frets really, really nicely. I mean, I've had some Gibson Les Paul Customs that have been worse than this, and this is custom shop, and yet this is a Vintera model. And by the way, I should say that these are manufactured in the Ensenada factory in Mexico. which is approximately 70 miles away from the Corona, California factory. So you can see there, it actually, all this bonding wraps around to where, and it actually wraps around and makes contact separately with the nut. So the nut has actually been filed away to a little thinner to fit between the binding. So that last bit there is not actually the nut, it's actually the binding. And you can see the binding there comes around all the way there to where the truss rod bullet is. So you've got pearloid inlays, block inlays, as they did back in the 70s. This is a traditional 70s neck. So if I compare this to my Fender Player Series jazz bass, there's not that much difference, but it is a slight thicker, but not that much. You've got your skunk stripe in the back, really, really nice, looks good. You've got your 20 vintage frets. So I would probably call these narrow frets. They're not like the medium jumbo frets that you get on the Player Series, which are noticeably wider and probably a little bit bigger. You've got your synthetic bone nuts, Power Ferro fretboard. Now, this particular fretboard, it's really interesting. If you look at the grain, it starts a bit sort of nice and natural and sort of becomes a bit fades or dulls up a little bit as you get to the bottom here, which is nothing wrong, but it's just a contrast. And one thing I have found with the Power Ferro fretboards is they are the most varying texture of fretboards amongst other species. When you buy a guitar with rosewood, it's going to be a brown, dark brown. Ebony's pretty much going to be black. With Power Ferro, I find on Fender basses, guitars, and so forth, you could get a light brown, you can get a dark brown, you can get no grain, you can get a heavy grain, you can get one that's very, very smooth and no porous, open little holes that you get in like the likes of rosewood. Others you can get that are just like a flat piece of wood with no openings. It's not porous at all. Others you can get really, really black. I mean, it's really luck of the draw, if you want to call it that. You've got your traditional 70s Fender bullet style exposed truss rod nuts, which I actually prefer these. But just be mindful that this particular nut size is not your traditional 3/16 that you get in other Player Series basses. This is a 1/8 of an inch. So it's a different spec. So if you try and put the 3/16, it won't fit. It'll be too big for this. You've got your traditional string post, and you've got these really nice open back tuners, the vintage style tuners at the back. The neck is finished in a nice gloss urethane finish. So again, the body and the neck have got like this varnish finish. And because you've got these really nice open back tuners, the base plate, as you can see, is really big. And one thing I did find is actually, I'll go on to this later, but because you've got these open back tuners, this is a very neck heavy guitar. You see that? It just drops. Yeah, it just drops. So I would recommend investing in a Levy's leather strap like I've got. Now, that's pretty much the specifications. Let's talk about a few things that I've found that that you might need to look out for. When I bought this bass, it actually played really nice. There was a little bit of buzzing, but it wasn't enough to really sort of take my, to sort of draw our concerns and start the radars start going off. But I guess I also got caught up in the moment because I walked into my local music store with a Van Halen t-shirt, and the serial number on this bass guitar, I kid you not, includes 5150. The title of the first album that Van Halen recorded with Sammy Hagar, their then new vocalist, and also their first #1. And so I was like, wow, in a fantasy world. But when I got home, these last few frets were really uneven, and I changed my strings, and I've got now a set of Labella 760 FS deep talking bass, flat wound, 45 to 105 gauge, and I was getting a tremendous amount of buzzing to the point where even from about the 5th fret it was just buzzing all the way. But now you can hear it. it's around here, sort of the 17th, 18th, 19th, and then it goes away. So what's happened now is I used a filing crown, a crown file, should I say, and also some other tools. And I also used these erasers that you can buy from the likes of StewMac. They're like little rubbers or erasers that you used to use at school, but they're color-coded because they're color-coded specifically for each grading. The yellow one is 8,000 all the way down to about 220, and so the lower the grading, the more coarse it is. So after I went through with the crown file, and I went through quite a few times, I've now got it to a level which it's much, much better. So I was a bit disappointed about that. And I would have thought, you know, for something that's the upper end of the Made in Mexico models, Fender would have paid a bit more attention to that. And when I ran my fret rocker, you could actually hear it bouncing between, you know, 3 frets at a time. Like one fret was sitting a bit too proud, and it was just bouncing or rocking too much. So I've managed to file most of them down. I've probably got a little bit more to do on the 18th fret, but as it is now, you know, it's acceptable. So that was one thing. Another thing is the thickness of the headstock. The thickness of the headstock is actually about 3 millimeters less thick or thinner than the headstock of my Fender Player series. So I was about to find out the hard way, because I was going to replace the string tree with another string tree that's actually got grooves underneath it, underneath here, which allows the string to just glide a bit smoother underneath the string tree. So as it is now, this string tree, the Fender one, is just flat underneath. The one that I wanted to install had grooves for each of the D and the G strings. And what I lost my pick. And what I was going to do, I was about to start screwing it, but then I thought, no, let me line up the new string tree here and see where the screw comes to. And the screw literally came through the woodwork, the actual headstock. So worst case, I could have been screwing it and then realized, oh my God, it's protruded out and would have looked so ugly, and it would have been a heartbreaking experience. So if you are going to change the string tree, please be mindful that the headstock on this bass guitar is about 3 millimeters thinner than the likes of, let's say, my Player series. On those bass guitars, the same string tree, no problem. You know, we wouldn't even, it just happened that something was going off in my head, and it's like, be careful, and it's like, great. What was the other thing I noticed is that these particular tuners, they look nice. Like I said, they're very period correct. But because they've got that big plate down the bottom, that sort of trapezius style, it drops a lot. And one thing I did notice is the actual grooves, if you can see it, the actual grooves of the machine, of the round wheel, if I can sort of portray it, imagine this shaft here is this hand, and this is my right hand. What's happening is there's a bit too much flack, a bit too much way. And what I'm finding is that sometimes these tuners aren't the best at holding the strings in tune. So they can be a bit frustrating sometimes, that you tighten it or loosen it and you think you're at pitch when you're tuning your string, but then you leave it a few seconds later and it's like it moves a little bit in one direction or the other depending whether you're tightening or loosening it. And then before you know it, you think you're at pitch, but then you do it, you check your tuning again and your E string's a little bit sharp or it's gone a little bit flat. And sometimes I can sit there sort of going a bit too long and like want to get into it and start playing. So what I've done is I've bought myself a set of replacement tuners. These are Goddos made in Japan. They're a direct replacement. And these are a 20-to-1 ratio. And when I look in the actual package, you can see that the gears fit much more snug into the shaft. And I was just playing around with them yesterday and they feel really smoothly. So that's one thing I've done. what else should I talk about? Also, when I took this home and started working on it and so forth, I must have applied about 3 metric gallons of lemon oil. I kid you not. I put so much lemon oil onto this fretboard, and it was dry, as we say in Australia, it was as dry as a black stump in a desert storm. It was that dry. So I was a bit surprised. I've never had that experience with any Fender or any guitar at all. I was just putting the lemon oil on, and even before I could wipe the cloth, even before I could just wipe it on, it was just dissolving into the wood. It was just drying off. It was like, wow. Forgot to mention the radius on the neck is 7¼ inches. So what that means is, if you remember your mathematics at school, radius is a measurement of half a circle, basically. In other words, from the center, if you go 7¼ inches up and draw a circle, the curvature of that circle will equal the curvature of this neck of the fretboard. And what does that mean? It means the smaller the radius, in other words, the smaller the radius, the more curved the fretboard is going to be. Once you start getting to 12 inches and 16 inches, when you actually draw a circle, it's pretty much going to be flat. So one thing you'll find is that because of that, the action on a vintage neck tends to be higher. And why is that? Because if you're looking down the neck, let's say at this angle, the neck on a 7¼ inch, the profile, the fretboard, should I say, is going to be a lot more curved. But then when you get to a 12 inch, it flattens out because you're dealing with a much more larger and more smoother curvature. So what that means is that, especially on electric guitars, if the radius of a neck is smaller, the fretboard is more curved. And as you're bending up a note, the note will actually make contact with the peak of the curvature of the fretboard, and the note drowns out. And that's why they say, you know, if you want a guitar that's really going to bend the notes and sustain the notes, you get something like, you know, 9½, 12 is much more preferable. 16, you tend to find a lot of these shred guitars will have, you know, 12 to 16 inch radius as the fretboard moves up. So what I did find with this one is the action, I've got it at about 2¼ millimeters on each string, whilst with my player series, on my yellow jazz bass, I've got it down to just under, somewhere between 1¾ and 2 millimeters. So let's talk about some of the work that I've done. So I changed the vintage steel bent bridge for a hip shot kick-ass bridge, and I've got to say I've been a bit disappointed with hip shot lately. Some of the orders that I've placed through the likes of Stu Mac and other places as well, I'm noticing that the quality of hip shot is deteriorating. With this one, I don't know if you can see it, but where the wall is there, right on the D and the G string, let me see if I can bring it closer. I don't know if you can see it, but there's scratches and markings, and I was really disappointed in that. And you'll also see that 2 of the bridge saddles are steel. You see here, steel, brass, steel, and brass on the low E string. The reason why I had to change this one is because the actual bridge saddle, and these bridge saddles in the hip shot bridge are removable. There's a little hexagon screw, an Allen screw here right in front, that you can loosen it, and this just pops out, the little bridge saddle, whether it's steel, and you can not only replace them, but you can also move them up and down to allow whether that you want the strings to be closer together or further apart, which is great. But where the groove is, like, because it's like a V design where the string sits in, there was like something was like missing. I don't know if there was just pressure on the string that pushed it down on the brass bridge saddle, but then I was getting this really disturbing buzz that I just couldn't concentrate, so I had to remove that. And also what I found was, and I don't know if it's the bridge or maybe the pickups, but I found that the A string was not as prominent in terms of volume as the other strings. And they do say that when you replace bridge saddles with brass to steel, steel tends to bring out a more pronounced and louder tone. So I was a bit disappointed with hip shot. So what I've gone ahead and done, I've also bought myself, whether I put it on this bass or another bass, is a replica of the original Amiga Badass bridge manufactured by Leo Kwong. And I'm really looking forward to trying this out one day, because as you can see, you've got three big grooves for the E and the A string. Oh, sorry, that's the D and the G string. You've got three big grooves for the E and the A string, and then you've got four small grooves for the D and the G string, which allow you to just lift up the string without actually, unscrewing the Hipshot kick-ass bridge, moving the bridge saddle up and down. You can just loosen the string a bit and just pop the string between the grooves, which I think it's great. You've got really, really long screws that'll really help you out with intonation, and it's there's pretty much the same thickness and pretty much the same design. Obviously, Hipshot was mimicking the Amiga bridge, so I might take this off at some point, and I might replace it with the Amiga bridge and try that out. Other than that, I think, and also just finally, where the skunk stripe is here, things to look out for, you'll see that there's just a, let me see if I can just bring it, I don't know if you can see, but it looks like there's just a little tip there that didn't seem to be sanded off correctly. And what I did notice is that there was a very slight protruding bump of wood. It doesn't really affect me, because by the time I get to down here, I'm playing with my palm against the F note or something like that. It's not like down here there's something protruding. But to be honest with you, I can feel something, but I didn't want to start chipping it away in case I chipped away at the urethane finish. So overall, look, I love the guitar. I love the design. I love what it represents and so forth. But I've got to say, I was a bit disappointed with Fender and also Hipshot this time round. Other changes that I've made is I've installed Seymour Duncan quarter-pound pickups, and underneath here I've installed an Obsidian wire unit. An Obsidian wire is a New Zealand company that allows you to install a unit. It's just one piece, and the potentiometers just fit through the standard holes for American and Mexican made guitars. For Japanese and Indonesian and so forth, you might have to make some holes bigger because they use metric pots, and these are imperial. And it's solderless. There's like this little control panel that's spring loaded that you just press down, and then you just insert the ground on the hot wires of the pickups, and then there's a little thing on the side where you unloosen the screw and then put in the ground wire from the bridge in there, and just tighten it up and you're done. That's it. So that's all the work that I've done. That's the specifications. Overall, I like the bass guitar. It's a great guitar. It sounds nice. I've got to admit, this pickup particularly, I've had to lower it quite a bit, because at one point when I had it a little bit high, it actually sounded more like a P bass, like it was a real thumpy growl to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'll finish off the review with some sound samples, and I'll have both volumes at full and tone at full, and I'll just play one of my favourite bass lines, Kisses Sure Know Something. So here we go. So now what I'll do is I'll turn off wind back the neck pickup all the way, so I'm just on the bridge and I've got full tone. Now, for me, that sounded pretty gnarly, and the reason being, and one thing I should also note is, during the 70s, Fender moved the bridge pickup a little bit back further to the bridge, whilst the 60s Vintera jazz bass has the bridge pickup a little bit more forward. It's also worth noting the 60s Vintera jazz bass, the machine heads are reverse wounding, so it's anti-clockwise for tightening and clockwise for loosening. Okay, so let's now let's now play with the middle pickup and with full tone. And then, now let's play the same pickup, but I'll wind back the tone all the way. So it's got nice sustain there, you know, it does sustain really, really nice. And let's now play the bridge pickup again, but with no tone. And what I'll do now is I'll play both pickups full and with no tone. Now, personally for me, folks, my sweet spot is when I've got the neck or middle pickup at full, and basically the way that I position my white markers is that the tone pickup is pointing to the bridge pickup. Sorry, the tone knob is pointing to the bridge pickup. You see it? It's just pointing there. Now, what I do is the bridge pickup, I'll turn pointing back to the lead. You see how it's pointing back to the lead? That I find is the maximum output, because these pickups are rated around 13 K DC resistance. But when you put them both on at full, they both drop half. It all comes back to about combined about 6.5. When I turn that volume knob of the bridge pickup back to the pointing the lead, it jumps up back to around 12, 13. And that for me is the maximum output that I can get for this bass. And when I play it, for me, this is a sweet spot as I play now. And it just rings and rings and rings. You can still hear it. So that pretty much comes to the end of my review. I hope that you guys got benefit out of this. I really, really enjoy doing these reviews. Please leave your comments. Like I said, keep them respectful. Hit subscribe. I'm, between children and work and everything else, I'm putting out videos whenever I can. I do hope you find these videos helpful. And at the same time, it's my absolute joy and pleasure to provide these videos for you. So look after yourselves, take care, God bless, and keep rocking. Okay, see ya.